Okay.
All right. I need to explain to you the context. Every year at a conference that's Folk Alliance Region West, Far West, there is a project that's been going on for several years now called Now See Here, HEAR. And the idea was that a song would be chosen to start each thread, and then other performing or visual artists would create something based on that song and then bounce it to a third art form and so on. And each thread has been developing for several years now. I was asked a few years ago if I could actually create original stories or come up with stories that would link into these threads. So every year I've been creating an original story based on material that exists in one of the threads. And we have fun with it. We do a live concert there, sort of, that is about 3 hours long because there's a lot of material. And then the whole thing is recorded. All the new material goes up onto the website to inspire more people for later. So bear in mind that I do kind of weird stuff even for me. Now, this particular piece was inspired by a piece of artwork and by a song that were both in one of the threads, and both of them got me to thinking about the idea of seeing things in black and white that you would normally see in color, and what would cause that. And so I started thinking about, well, when it's really kind of dark, the way your eyes work, the parts that see color kind of don't work. So you see things in black and white then. And this is the story that came out of that. Now, I probably wouldn't have noticed the sign except for a college literature course. Being that it was at Caltech, it was a strange literature course, and the fact that the professor assigned The Crying of Lot 49 by Thomas Pynchon would have been odd even for most courses back then. But in that story, part of the thing is, well, if you've never read it, I have to explain to you. It's about the great international postal conspiracy that's been going on for the last several centuries. In fact, two families in Europe fought over the rights to deliver mail for hundreds of years. Now, supposedly, this all ended when countries started their post offices in the 19th century. But Thomas Pynchon's story is about it didn't end, it just went underground. And that the battle between the families is still going on, and you can find the secret mailboxes of one of those families because it looks like a trash can, but the letters waste have periods in between them. W period, A period, S period, T period, E period, which stands for we await silent Tristero's empire. Now, that has nothing to do with the actual story, except for the fact that that's why I noticed the sign. You see, I stop at a particular bus stop a lot because it's right near a theater that I go to. It's right near a lot of restaurants. It used to be where I changed buses on the way home. And there was a sign there visible from where I was sitting at the bus stop. It was one of those bus stops that has a shelter above it and lights and a place for movie posters on the side. But peeking out around the corner was a sign that said LAST lighting. Now, I thought at first, wait, that's an LA street lighting sign. And then I realized there's no punctuation on that sign. It's not L period, A period, space, ST period lighting. It's just the letters LAST lighting. Well, now in most cities, the street lighting department isn't a big deal, and you might think they would play around a little bit. But in Los Angeles, you have to understand that the street lighting department is important. You probably don't know this, but they actually have a street lighting museum for the city of Los Angeles. A lot of places will have a fire department museum or a police department museum. Water and Power doesn't have anything like this, but there's an LA street lighting museum, and it shows off the different lines and designs for the street lights of Los Angeles over history. You don't mess around with the street lighting people. So this sign was a little weird. And the other thing that was weird was this was in the evening after everybody would have gone home from working, and it wasn't attached to a street light. Normally, this is the kind of sign you'd put up if you're working on a street light and you don't want people to trip on fresh cement or something like that. No, it was just sitting there next to the bus shelter. There was no street light there. There was no space for a street light there. It was just sitting there. Well, maybe they forgot. Maybe it was something they were doing just up the street, because there are street lights up and down the street. I was on Lancashire, and it's very well lit with the street lights, but it wasn't close to one. Well, somebody made a mistake, and I went home. But a couple of days later, I found myself at that same bus stop, and the sign was still there, still as if it was marking the bus shelter rather than a street light. Now, the street lighting people are not the kind of people who leave things just sitting around for days. So something was clearly wrong. They must have lost count of the number of signs they were supposed to bring back to their department. Only this didn't have a phone number or anything on it where you could call. That's funny. Usually signs like that have some kind of general department phone number. This one didn't. Well, it was there all week. And it wasn't until late in the week that something made me think about what the sign was really there for. Because I'd been thinking about the crying of Lot 49 and that silly postal conspiracy. And I thought to myself, wouldn't it be funny if there was a street lighting conspiracy? And there were really two different departments fighting it out for doing street lights? Now, nobody could do that, of course, because, I mean, even bureaucracies have limits to how silly they could be, right? But I went to the movie up the street, and then around the corner to have a late night snack. See, there's a place around the corner from there called Republic of Pie. And they have the most amazing pie-related things on their menu. Savory, sweet, anything you might want. And after that, I went back to the bus stop to head home. Now, you have to understand that for those of you who don't take public transportation, in Los Angeles, some of it runs 24 hours a day. And the bus that runs up Lancashire is one of those. So I was just going there close to midnight, waiting for the bus to come along. It was supposed to be there in just a few minutes. By then, most of the businesses around there had turned off their lights for the night, except for a couple of late night places still going strong. But it seemed awfully dark even for that. Now, it was pretty close to the corner of the cross street, and I looked around the corner. Pretty much all the businesses along there were dark, even ones I thought might still be open. I mean, this was late, but it was a Saturday night. In fact, as I looked east along that side street, there was no light at all after a ways down the street. It's like a power failure in the next area to the east. Well, that could happen. It's happened before. Only, see, when there's a power failure and there's darkness, it's kind of like you can see why and where it's dark. But this was dark in a different way. It was more like, you know, when the sun comes up in the morning and you see the way the light changes because the sun's shining there? This was darkness like that. As if there was something out there just being dark and radiating dark and making it dark. Well, I thought, nope, I'm just overthinking this. I'm doing this to myself. It's like in one of those scary movies where you scare yourself with something that's perfectly normal. And I went back and sat down at the bus shelter. It was only another couple of minutes before the bus should arrive. And then I looked up and down Lancashire and saw the same thing, where the street lights weren't lit anymore up and down the street. I was still getting light from the bus shelter. It was silly. It was a poster for a new Spy Kids movie. But the other thing I noticed was that the sign that was sitting there, that LAST lighting sign, that little, sort of thing that forms an A shape if you look at it from the side, it was moving. As if someone was pulling it around the corner of the bus shelter. Well, I thought to myself, I've got to see who's doing this. So I stood up, went to the corner of the bus shelter, and all the lights went out. I could not see a hand in front of my face, and it was only that I was touching the corner of the bus shelter that allowed me to get back to where I could sit down and wait, because you can't walk when you can't see anything. Well, in a couple of minutes, just up the street, I saw a street light come on, and then another, and they started coming on all up and down the street, all up and down Lancashire. And there down the street, coming, chugging along with its headlights bright, was my bus. But did those street lights look right? Were they the same color they were before they went dark? Were they the same shape they were before they went dark? Maybe I better stop visiting museums for a while.
Is that it?
That was an unusual story, even for you.
No, I've never heard Nick tell something like that. So that was interesting. I actually really like that.
Yeah.
Yeah, I'm seriously creeped out now.
Existential. What was the inspiration? Can you share real quick what the inspiration was?
There was a piece of artwork that was a flower, but done all in black and white, and a song about things losing color. And I really did find a sign that looked like that. And it really was next to the bus shelter on Lancashire.
Wow. And so the neat thing about this story, you then created the storyline for the rest of it.
Yes.
Love that. Yeah. Love that. Wow.
Yeah, well,
And that the Republic of Pi is a real place.
Yeah. Well, way out of your genre from what you usually do.
Yes. Well, that's the thing. It's for these, it's kind of like I was told I could do something and just adapt something that I was already performing or create something original. And this has been such an interesting challenge to create original stories based on something from these threads.
Yeah. I like that.
no, that's really cool.
Neat.
So, and it's inspired a couple of other people who have heard storytelling to try doing short pieces for it too.
Yeah.
So that's the other thing, is it's like spreading the art of storytelling in a direction that people don't expect it to come from and seeing what happens.
Oh yeah, you took me on a journey there in my mind. I like that.
The person who wrote the song that was part of this thread was let to hear the story because she wasn't there for the performance, and she was stunned that I came up with that based on her song and the piece in question, because she'd seen the piece of artwork.
That is cool.
So Nick, what was the thread originally?
That one,
Like?
I would actually have to go back and look, because some of the threads have really strange names. I will try to do that and let you know before the end of tonight's meeting, because I have to look at the website to give you the name. I mean, some of them are things where, like, one of them is about penguins in hot weather. It is the title of the thread. Another one is something about where things go horribly wrong, but you still get chocolate. Um,
I like that.
so the thread name, I would have to go back and get it for you, because there are something like 17 threads in the thing. And they're all heavily populated with stuff now, because this has been going for several years.
Nick, if you don't mind me making a comment, I don't know if you guys felt this way, but it felt like LA film noir.
Yeah.
That's what I was
Yeah.
having him unpack,
Yeah.
Mhm.
which was really cool.
Which was kind of accentuated by things going black and white.
Right.
Immediately, I kind of.
Yeah.
Yes.
No, thank you, Nick. Okay, I am gonna remove the spotlight from you, and I see Adrian has joined us. Welcome, Adrian. Adrian, do you have a story tonight? And
There you
if you have a story, Adrian, do you want to be next?
I won't be next, but I do have one.
Okay, but you don't want to be next. Okay.
No.
Jean, do you have a story tonight? Oh, maybe Jean stepped away.
I'm sort of in a listening mode tonight, so
Okay,
no,
that's fine.
I
That's-
don't have one.
Okay, so I'm going to switch the spotlight then. Okay. Now let me get the participants out. I know. Okay.
I have the title of the thread. It's the thread called "The Thread That Will Send You Over the Edge."
Into darkness, yes.
Yeah, that's a good thread name. Okay, now the spotlight is here in the forum. You want to do your story now or later?
Yeah.
Do it now? Okay, so we're gonna turn this around so you'll be standing up. And our Zoom people just got seasick as I did that.
There you go. I've never been on a Zoom. It flies out. I gotta check that out sometime.
I'm going to take you to a very small town near New York where Johnsy lives. Johnsy lives in a very small town, and she doesn't want to be a farmer's wife. She doesn't want to work at the general store. She doesn't want to work at a restaurant. So when she turns 18, she decides she's going to move to New York, and she's going to, thank you, and she's going to become a famous artist, she tells her parents. So she moves to New York. And, you know, becoming a famous artist is not that easy. So she's not making any money. But she gets a flat with a friend named Susan and she gets a job working at a newsstand. Susan is a sketch artist for the local magazines. And it seems like everybody in the village is an artist. And she loves it there. Even the janitor's an artist. He's an old German immigrant named Hans. And he lives in the basement. And he paints and sells paintings to the tourists. One day, I'm going to paint a masterpiece, he tells Johnsy. Hello.
Own it? Oh, good. Oh, we were ready to mount the chairs. We need one more.
Come on in.
Come on in. Welcome.
Good to see you. You made it. You're glad.
He made it.
One more chair. Here we go.
We're good.
Yeah.
There we are.
So we're in New York, where Johnsy has moved to become a famous artist. She's renting a flat with Susan. Susan is a sketch artist for the magazine, and she's not becoming a famous artist. She can't make money at it. So she's got a job at the magazine stand in Greenwich Village. Well, she loves the neighborhood. Everybody that lives there seems to be an artist. Even the janitor, he's a German immigrant named Hans, and he works as the janitor in the building, and then he also paints paintings and sells it to the local tourists. one day I'm going to make a masterpiece. That's what he says to Chauncey, and Chauncey believes him. Well, in 1907, pneumonia hits New York, and there is no cure for pneumonia. Chauncey gets ill. She gets bedridden, and she's just not feeling well, and she's getting worse and worse. Susan tries to give her soup, and she stops eating, and she looks out the window at this vine that's growing on the wall, and she says, when the last leaf falls, I'm going to die. And so Susan gets a doctor to come. The doctor says, there's nothing I can do. And even the janitor comes and tries to convince her that she wants to live. And she just says, no, when the last leaf falls, I'm going to die. Well, the leaves start falling one by one. There's a terrible storm that night, and the winds howl, and the rain pours. And the next morning she looks out, and all the leaves are gone, but one. And so she hangs on. The next day she looks out, and that leaf is still there. And every day she looks out the window, and that one leaf is just hanging on through the winter. And eventually winter starts to go away, and the sun comes out and it shines, and she gets better. And Susan is so excited. She goes to tell the janitor that Chauncey's better. She's out of bed, but she finds out the janitor has passed. You see, one stormy night, he went out and he painted a leaf on the wall where the vine was.
Oh.
And from the cold, he got sick and he died. But he did his masterpiece.
I like that. That's fantastic.
Yeah, Walter shared that story. Yeah.
I like that. So that's the leaf that was painted.
Yeah.
I like that.
Okay, we had a couple more people arrive. Introduce yourself to this group and the three Zoom people.
Well, hi, Nick, Elaine, anyway, okay. And anybody else that happens to be listening, I'm Ron Chick. I live in Riverside, and I've been telling stories anywhere and everywhere for many years.
Okay, want to introduce yourself to the people on Zoom and everybody else here?
Hello, I'm Maynard. Hope everybody's good tonight. Hello. Hi.
Thank you, Maynard. Okay, so anybody else here, since we have the spotlight on here at the forum, anybody else have a story that they would like to tell at this point?
The story, but it doesn't have to be at this point. If you want to tell yours, that's
Okay, I can tell a story.
okay.
All right, my story is a folk tale from Korea, and it's called The Story Bag. Long, long ago, there was a rich family that had one son. And this boy, from a very early age, just loved to have people tell him stories. Every time he met a new person, he would ask him, do you have a story to tell me? And when they told him the story, he would take the story and put it in a bag that he always carried with him. Well, as he grew up and heard, over the years, many stories, the bag got full, and he ended up having to really push them in to get the stories to fit in the bag. And he was so afraid that they might fall out or escape, he tied the top of the bag with a rope and stopped becoming that interested in hearing no more stories as he became a teenager, and he hung it up in a closet. And he was a young man now, and time for him to get married, and the families made arrangements. And the way it worked at that time where he lived, the groom-to-be would ride to the bride's house and bring her back to his family's house, and that's where the wedding would occur. So they were making preparations at his house for the bride and presumably her family too, to come for the wedding. And one of the servants who had been there for many, many years and had, well, he had told the boy stories, and he had taught the boy how to fish, and he taught the boy the names of all the birds that came to the garden there at the house, and loved him dearly. He was in the kitchen doing something, and he thought he heard some whispering. And he wasn't sure where it was coming from. He sort of followed the sound, and he went into the closet, and the whispering was coming out of that story bag that was hanging in the closet. And he didn't say anything. He just listened. Well, one of the stories said, you know, the boy is getting married tomorrow. He has been so cruel to us, keeping us crammed into this bag. We're so tightly packed in here, we're not sure who is who and how to tell the story. I think it's time for revenge. I have an idea, said another story. I will tomorrow, along the road where he has to ride his horse to get his bride to be, I will become a berry bush with bright red berries and make him get hungry as he comes by, but my berries will be poisonous and he will eat them and die a very painful death. And all the fairies laughed. And then another story said, well, if that doesn't work, I can become a bubbling brook along the side of the road, but my waters will be poisonous and he will get thirsty when he sees me and he'll drink the water and he'll die. All the stories. And then another story said, well, if that doesn't work, I will become a red hot iron and I'll put myself into the chaff bag that he steps down to ceremoniously when he gets to the bride's house, and I will burn his feet. And then another story said, well, if all those things don't do the job, I will become a whole bunch of poisonous string snakes, and I'll hide in the bedchamber where the couple will retire for the night. I'll hide under the bed, and when they're sound asleep, I will come out as all these poisonous snakes and kill them both. Well, the servant was just aghast, and he thought, I've got to do something to save this boy. What can I do? I know I must insist that I go with him on this journey so that I can intervene and save him. And so when the servant said that he wanted to go with the boy to pick up the bride, the father said, no, you don't need to do that. He's a grown man now. Oh, I insist. I have watched him grow up from a babe up to a strong young man. It means so much to me. I really want to go. Okay, said the father, go ahead, you can go with him. So they took off towards the bride's house, and the first temptation, of course, was that berry bush. And so the groom to be said, oh man, am I hungry? Look at that berry bush. It looks really good. Let's stop and can you pick some berries for me? And the servant said, no, there's some more berry bushes further on in the road. These are kind of sour. There's sweeter ones further on. Let's wait till then. Well, he agreed. And as soon as they got past, he was no longer hungry and he forgot about it. Well, the next thing they saw was the bubbling brook. And he got really, really thirsty as they were approaching that. I need a drink. And the servant said, no, this is not a good one. It's kind of salty water. There's a much better water source further on in the road. And so he convinced him to keep going. And of course, as soon as he passed, he was no longer thirsty. Well, they finally get to the bride's house. And he's getting ready to get down off of the horse onto the ceremonial chaff-filled pillow to step down on it. And the servant pulls his horse so he misses and lands on the ground next to it and didn't land on the hot poker that was inside there. Well, they came into the bride's house. Whatever ceremony they do there was done, and the bride went with the groom to be and the servant back to the house of the groom to be. And they had a big wedding that afternoon, and they ate, they were merry, and then the bride and groom now went to the bedchambers for the night, and the servant waited outside the door very quietly, and he waited until the lights were off and there was no sound coming out, and then he burst into the room. He had a sword with him, and of course he woke them up, and the groom said, "What are you doing here? What's going on?" "I don't have time to explain. Just get out of this room. Get out of this room." And so they jumped out of the bed and they went to the doorway, but they didn't actually leave because they couldn't believe what they saw. This old man was almost possessed the way he went with that sword, and he started slashing the snakes this way and that way and this way and that way, and he killed all of the poisonous snakes. And then he explained to the young man what he had heard coming out of that story bag. And he explained that by keeping the stories confined in that bag, he had actually made them go crazy, that it was not a good thing, and they did all these horrible things, or tried to do these horrible things to get even, to get revenge, because they felt they had been abused by being held in the bag. And so the young man went to the closet, and there was the story bag, and he opened the bag and he said, "I'm so sorry. I'm so sorry. I enjoyed all of you as I was growing up. I didn't mean to punish you. I'm so sorry that I forgot about you and just left you here all tied up." And so he said, "Tomorrow I'll send a servant out to take you out into the countryside to tell all of this, let you all out and tell stories to anybody who will listen, so that you will no longer be confined." And so it is. Stories need to be shared, passed from one person to another. And when stories are shared and spoken, they will truly be alive and
Oh, that is brilliant. That is good. Very good.
okay. Who wants to be next?
I have a story tonight.
Okay, let's hear it.
And notice where you need to stand so they can see.
Oh,
you,
yeah,
So
okay.
your head isn't chopped off.
Oh, the first time I've seen myself on Zoom, so yeah, bear with me here. I'm going to digress for a second. Your story reminded me of something that actually happened to me the other day, and I've been practicing for the celebration. I don't know if everybody can hear me. I've been practicing for the celebration in front of my two cats, but which is a true story. One of them scratched me today, but I was in my movie room. You saw the movie room, and I had locked up one of the cats in a little tiny room, and I had no idea that he was locked up. So when you were talking about the stories in the story bag, I'm laying on the couch watching the Laker game, and I just hear this little faint voice. He'd been locked up for hours. Well, I felt horrible. So anyways, it made me think of that. I will let the stories out. But I have been rehearsing in front of my cat, so it's nice to be in front of a human audience tonight. The piece of music that is going to accompany me tonight is a piece titled Fade. And it's by a local artist here from Los Angeles, Charlie Nguyen. And his album cover for Fade, the single, is a man that walks in a field, which is emblematic of the story that I'm going to illuminate for you tonight. And I'm often reminded by all the conflict that we have in the world that's going on. And I look back through human history and I think of perhaps that has always been with us, this conflict. And what reminds me of that is the great 13th century poet and mystic Rumi, one of my favorites. And Rumi reminds us that out beyond ideas of wrongdoing and right doing, there lies a field. And he says that when the soul lays down in that grass, that the world is too full to speak of. And so what makes me think of that as we all unite tonight together is that we have a chance to get connected. In that space that comes together, we can become connected if we let go of our ideas of right and wrong and good and bad. And I too have walked in one of those fields that Rumi speaks of. And that's what I want to share a little bit about tonight. The year was 2018. I was driving through the northern mountains of Arizona, just outside of Flagstaff. And I arrived at an open field, majestic and beautiful in color, something I had never seen before. The mountains were in the back. And I did what Rumi whispered to us. I walked in that field and I felt that peace wash over me. It was a seminal moment, one that I'll always remember. And it's the inspiration of that makes me want to share this true story tonight with you guys. And it's a story I may have told before. I can't remember. Maybe John won't remember. It's the butterfly and the diving bell. And it's adapted from a movie, and the book, it's actually The Diving Bell and the Butterfly. And the year is 1995, and a man is driving through the north of France. And he would be near an area where the English Channel comes together, the mouth of the English Channel, near the River Authie in France. And it was near a small country village. And his journey would take him up into the mountains and eventually down to the city. And he would be united with his young son. As their journey continued through the French countryside, the man I speak of is Jean-Dominique Bauby. He was an elegant and dashing editor of the French fashion magazine Elle. And their journey would continue through the French countryside. And it was a warm, sunny Sunday afternoon. Jean-Dominique was in his convertible Jaguar with the top down and the breeze and the summer sun washing over them. And it was in that moment, that space that I'm talking about, where they had father and son, not a care in the world. The journey would continue that day through the French countryside until suddenly Bauby was struck by a sudden force. And the car would come to a stop off the side of the road in a few moments. And Bauby was rendered unconscious. And his young son knew that his life would be forever changed in that moment. Jean-Dominique was rushed to the hospital. He would not awaken from his coma for 3 weeks. When he did finally awake, he was completely paralyzed. He could not move any part of his body except, ironically, for his left eye. Doctors call it locked-in syndrome. Bauby would later describe it like being trapped in a diving bell, unable to move his body. For you see, Bauby had had a stroke. But something miraculous was to happen after this that I think binds all of us here tonight. When we do something where we reach inside our spirit, we all have this amazing power to do this. And what he decided was he was going to write his memoir. He was going to dictate his memoir. He used a system called partner-assisted scanning, whereby he would blink each word of his memoir. Now, this journey would last 1 year, and he would work on it from his hospital bed, completely paralyzed, for 4 hours a day. The book took an entire, not only year to blink, but over 200,000 blinks of his left eye to compose. Of this, he looked back over his life, and he described the life he once had as like a burning ember that was deep inside of him, burning amidst the fierce flames and the ashes of a life that was once and hence is no longer. He described beautiful memories of his life as well as many regrets. And so this year journey of him dictating his memoir culminated and the book was published. And within a few days, ironically enough, we would lose Bobby forever to time. Jean-Dominique Bobby was just 44. And of this experience of people hearing about him writing his book, many people describe Jean-Dominique as one of the most amazing humans that has ever lived. To be able to do something like that, trapped in your hospital bed. I chose to tell the story because I too lost a mother to a stroke here in Claremont. My mother, Nancy, was just 51. But my inspiration for sharing that story with you tonight is really a couple of reasons. That when Rumi whispers to us about finding our field, that you guys will find a field. Wherever that field may be, maybe it's a beach with sand, maybe it's the forest and the trees. But in that space, we will have the peace that washes over us, but it's the gratitude that we will have for our lives. And finally, I told the story because I think it reminds us of the power in our lives of love. We spend our lives accumulating things and houses and cars and jobs and positions and all these other things, but really what matters is love. And to me, that is the true takeaway of the diving bell and the butterfly.
And that was great. And I do remember that
You
story.
do, yeah.
It's not a story easily forgotten.
Yeah, it's a little heavy.
So the music, you decide what music.
You know, I started off with a music, I just started poking around the internet and Spotify, and I came up with a piece called Running Field. And then I simmered on it for a few days and it just wasn't feeling right. And what I'm learning about myself as a storyteller, and I don't know if it bothers everyone, but you know, I get a little self-conscious about it, is I no longer want to tell stories without music. And I don't, you know, Merrick and I were having dinner earlier and he was, you know, and we were talking about it. It's, for me, it's not a crutch. It's that the music inspires me. To just stand here, and that doesn't mean I'm not enjoying anyone else's stories. I do. I enjoy everyone else's stories, but when I tell a story, I get more inspired by listening to music. And then if I can tie that piece, like Running Fields or Fade, and the artwork was totally emblematic of what I was going to tell, then I get fired up. And I need that to be inspired to remember the story. So for me, it's more about the music just makes me feel better about telling the story.
I was glad that it was subtle enough.
Yeah,
I could listen to your story and not keep thinking.
being overpowered by it. Yeah, and that's what I always have to remember when I'm playing it, is to tone it down so it's not heavy. But for some reason, I no longer want to tell stories without it. So if it works for me, right?
Yeah. Storytelling is
Hey, John. Oh,
Yes.
how you do your art. Do it.
I'm ready. If I've got a student waiting, so I'm ready. If you're ready to move to the next person.
Yeah. Okay.
Okay.
So let me remove my spotlight and put you in spotlight. And now I need to turn you around so we all can see you.
Hi, Adrian.
Hello. Well, this is a story about Peddler Polly and the Story Stealer. Peddler Polly, goods bought here and sold here. That was the sign on Peddler Polly's cart as her horse pulled up the main street in Tailtown. Peddler Polly looked around and she smiled. I'm sure glad to be back in Tailtown. Imagine a town where Everyone tells stories. Peddler Polly parked at the town square. Over on the town hall, she saw a notice, story swap today. Bring a story if you still know one. If you still know one, Polly puzzled. Hello, Peddler Polly, came a sad little girl's voice. Well, it's my old friend Penny. Polly smiled. Do you have a good story for me? I'll gladly trade for something in my cart. Penny sobbed and sniffed. I don't have any stories at all. Hardly anyone in Tailtown does. We're all losing our stories. Losing your stories, Polly exclaimed. Whatever do you mean? Penny wiped her nose. We start to tell a story and then it's gone. We can't remember it anymore. Come to the story swap this afternoon and you'll see. Ladies and gentlemen, boys and girls, a voice boomed from a cart parked on the town square. Its sign said, Dr. Sebastian, Spellbinder, Entertainment, Paraphernalia. In the cart stood a man with a top coat, top hat, and a goatee, surrounded by piles of wooden boxes. A crowd was gathering before him. You've heard of a storyteller, Spellbinder went on, and you've heard of a storybook. Well, I'm here to show you something finer still, the brand new patented Spellbinder storybox. Oh, Peddler Polly, he's selling stories, Penny exclaimed. Dr. Spellbinder held up one of the wooden boxes, showing a pane of glass on one side. He flipped a switch and the glass came to life. Tiny characters moved across the pane and a tiny voice came out and someone in the crowd yelled, It's Cinderella! Dr. Spellbinder turned a knob and a different moving picture appeared. That's Puss in Boots, another person called out. He turned the knob again and that's Sleeping Beauty. Spellbinder held the box aloft and proclaimed, Never again will you have to ask for a story, and never again will you have to imagine the pictures. Who'll be the first to tell to buy a Spellbinder story box? I'll take one, someone yelled. So will I, another joined in. I'll take two, a third person waved. Before long, Dr. Spellbinder's cart was empty. The town square was covered with children and grown-ups, all staring blankly at the little boxes. I don't like the looks of this, Polly frowned. Later, when Peddler Polly arrived at the story swap that afternoon, town hall was packed. The room was buzzing with talk about lost stories and Spellbinder story boxes. Finally, Mayor Bertha Bigwig took the stage. She glanced nervously around her. Welcome to the story swap. It's my honor to tell the first story, The Pied Piper of Hamelin. From her seat by an open window, Peddler Polly heard a soft whir and a click-sucking sound. Life in the town of Hamelin, Bertha went on, was pleasant, or it would have been, if not for the mayor turned pale. I've lost my story, she exclaimed. And she ran from the stage. A horrified murmur rose in the room. Milton Marbles, the school teacher, tried next. My story is Jack and the Beanstalk. Again, Peddler Polly heard the whirr and the sucking sound. Milton went on. There once was a poor widow who had only a son named oh no, and he fled the stage in tears. Next came Penny. This is the myth of Pegasus. Peddler Polly heard the same noises once more. Penny went on. A long time ago in Greece, there was a horse called Pegasus. This horse was special because Bertha Bigwig jumped up and exclaimed, Stop the story swap. We can't afford to lose any more stories. It's the end of storytelling in Tailtown. As excited talk filled the room, Peddler Polly thought she heard a cackle out the window. She looked and saw a man with a top coat and a top hat hurry away from the building. He carried a large wooden box covered with switches, knobs, and dials with a long hose attached to it. It's Spellbinder, Polly muttered to herself. I'd better look into this. Peddler Polly hastened from the hall. She followed Dr. Spellbinder from a distance as he left the town and made his way to the hills. At last, Dr. Spellbinder disappeared through the mouth of a cave. Peddler Polly followed him in and stopped in astonishment. The huge cave was filled with mechanisms and contraptions, all of them noisily pulling and pushing or pulsing and pounding. Dr. Spellbinder stood at a workbench covered with story boxes and other strange devices. He set down the big box he was carrying and patted it fondly. 3 more stories to put in my story boxes, and all thanks to my brilliant invention, the Spellbinder Story Sucker. Soon I'll steal all the stories in the world. Then everyone will need a story box and I'll be rich, rich, rich. Not if I can help it. Polly jumped into view. Peddler Polly, what are you doing here? Putting an end to your evil plans, Spellbinder, she cried out. You'll never stop me, Peddler Polly, Spellbinder gloated. Then Dr. Spellbinder grabbed the story sucker and sprinted from the cave. Down the hill sped Dr. Spellbinder while Peddler Polly puffed in pursuit. Without the story sucker, Peddler Polly was faster. You won't catch me so easily, Polly, Spellbinder called back to her. He lifted the lid of the story box, and there was a flash of light as he threw something backwards. See how you like this story, Peddler Polly? Well, out of nowhere, a huge crowd of children appeared, coming up the hill towards Peddler Polly. They were led by a man in a many-colored costume playing on a pipe. Well, I'll be, she cried out. Peddler Polly pushed past the startled man and pressed through the crowd of mesmerized children. It's a catchy tune, kids, but I wouldn't follow a Pied Piper. Dr. Spellbinder was far ahead, but Peddler Polly ran hard and gained on him. One good story deserves another, Spellbinder cackled, and he reached into the story sucker. Another flash, and Peddler Polly saw a boy chopping down a gigantic beanstalk. But just then the boy took to his heels, calling, "Heads up!" Peddler Polly looked up and stopped just in time. A huge man tumbled from the sky and landed with an earth-shaking crash just before her. Didn't know stories could be so dangerous, she yelped. Peddler Polly ran around the giant while she waved to the boy and called, "Thanks, Jack." Dr. Spellbinder had vanished behind a hill. Peddler Polly panted after him. As she rounded the bend, she gasped. Tied to a landing platform was a lighter-than-air balloon, and Dr. Spellbinder was climbing into the basket. Oh, no! Now he'll get away for sure, unless... It's all over now, Peddler Polly, Spellbinder laughed. Spellbinder untied the rope and the balloon floated into the air. But I still have one more story, and it might as well keep you busy. Polly smiled too. If it's the one I think it is. Dr. Spellbinder threw it to the ground. Another flash, and there stood a horse with long, graceful wings. Pegasus! Peddler Polly ran and leaped into the horse's saddle and dug in her heels. The horse flapped its wings smoothly and rose in the air, up and up. It spiraled until it was flying circles around the dismayed Dr. Spellbinder. Guess you forgot your mythology, Spellbinder. Didn't you know Pegasus was a flying horse? Peddler Polly rode in close, grabbed Dr. Spellbinder, and flung him across the horse's back. My story sucker! Cried Dr. Spellbinder as the balloon floated away with his invention. I don't guess you'll need it where you're going. For a crime like shutting up stories, a judge is sure to shut you up unhappily ever after. A few weeks later, when all of Dr. Spellbinder's story boxes had been opened and the stories returned to their tellers, the people of Tailtown held a big storytelling festival on the town square. Mayor Bigwig announced, and our special guest for today is Peddler Polly. Hooray! The crowd exclaimed. Well, thanks. And now I'll tell you a story called Peddler Polly and the Story Stealer. And that's a tale they'll always tell in Tailtown.
Yeah. Is there a theme, a little theme between you two? This is good.
Did you write that yourself?
No, actually, I'm not surfing around looking at cactus cats last month. I stumbled on a fabulous website with a whole bunch of readers' theater scripts.
Mm.
And I thought, well, it doesn't take much to reverse the script and make it a single person script. So, yeah, it's by Aaron Shepard.
Yeah, well, were you here last week? Last month? Because
Yeah.
Aaron Shepard's story.
Oh, that was okay. That was it. I was thinking I was searching for something. Yes, that was it. So I picked up, I went to his website and found a bunch of them. I've got a student waiting for me online, so I'm going to have to go.
Fast question. Are you telling that Saturday night?
No, actually, I'll probably tell the story that I told at the online story swap
Last Saturday, yeah.
Yep.
last Saturday. Yeah. It's been a heck of a week. I'll probably tell that one because yeah, John, I got your email. Thank you for your kind words. I was planning on telling that one this coming Saturday, and I thought, well, I'll just tell it tonight because someone on the the story concert ahead of me, a couple people told the story I was going to tell.
Yes,
Oh, no.
which was also the story I was going to tell.
Exactly. I know. We were all looking at Wally Dodd and the gifts of the grass cutter and its various titles and such. And so I pulled that one out instead. And I thought, well, I don't see too many people on this online concert that I think we'll see on Saturday coming up. So
Yeah, it's perfect.
yeah, I think I'll go ahead and tell that one again.
Yeah.
So, all right, y'all. See you on Saturday.
That's
Yeah.
good.
Bye.
Wally Dodd is the only story I've found that matches the theme of Thanksgiving. And I've been telling it off and on for years. But apparently other storytellers have found the same thing. Karen Chase has it on her website. If you don't know Karen Chase, she has how to tell 1,000 different stories on her website. Literally KarenChase.com, and she's wonderful. Anyway, so I was actually thinking of telling tonight because I thought it's the right story for this season. But I've got other tales, so whatever you want to do.
Do you have a story for tonight?
I can tell a story.
Okay, good. Let me
You
turn
say
this around.
KarenChase.com?
KarenChase.com.
Okay, run and position yourself if you need to adjust that. Make sure you're in the screen.
Having mentioned it and not having got a chance to tell it yet this year, I shall tell you the story of Wally Dodd J, or Wally Dodd the Bald. Wally lived at the edge of the Wadi, outside a small town. He made his living by going out into the swampy land and cutting grass and fuel and carrying it up to the road and then into the town and selling it for a few pennies each day. But his needs were simple. His house was sound. He had a bed, a little warm, and clothing, and he bought bread and onions to eat. So each time he sold his fuel, he had a few coins left over and would drop them into the mouth of a jar under his bed. His father had done the same before that, and it taught him that the day will come when you will not be able to cut and you will need savings. And so he had done this for many, many years and was growing old and tired. But he noticed in recent weeks, as he dropped coins in, that the sound was different. And one night he came home and he had 3 pennies to drop in. He dropped his 3 pennies in, and one of them slipped out of the jar that was now full. He thought, well, I shall have to do something about that tomorrow. And so the next morning, when he got up, he dug through his floor and pulled out an enormous jar full of coins. Apparently his grandfather, or maybe his great-grandfather, had started this tradition. He looked at it and he poured them out, and he didn't even know if he could count that high. He thought, what can I do with this wealth? I am not my needs are simple. I mean, yeah, I could use a new bed and maybe another change of clothing, but what else can an old man with a foot on the grave possibly need? I will have to sell the coins. I will have to trade them in on something. But he went into his village and he found very little he could possibly want. But one of his steady customers was a jeweler. And he went to the jewel shop and said, what am I to do? I cannot keep this enormous number of coins there. Someone will steal them. I could be killed over them. Have you anything of equivalent value? And the merchant counted it and said, well, get several smaller things, but years ago, we took in trade a beautiful bracelet that is far too valuable for anyone in our village to ever own. I will trade you that for your coins. And so the deal was made. It was a beautiful bracelet with many different kinds of jewels. And he looked at it and carried it back to his house and set it up on his mantle briefly. And then he thought, I'm a man and an old man. What am I to do with this beautiful thing? It just so happened the next day that a longtime customer and friend, a traveling merchant, came by with his caravan. And he came in to talk to Wally, and Wally said, I cannot keep this beautiful thing. Of all the princesses and all the fine ladies you have met in the world, which one is the most deserving, the kindest, and the sweetest? Ah, that would be the Princess Castante. She is renowned for her kindness, her generosity, and her beauty. Take this to her on your journey. Give it to her and tell her that it is given to her from one who has admired her virtue from afar. And he was quite willing to do so. And so in his journey, brought himself to that capital city. He presented himself at the palace and spoke to the princess and gave her the beautiful bracelet. And said, from someone who has heard of you and admired your kindness and grace. And then he went back to his regular work. The princess took it into her father and said, this is beautiful, but how can I? We must repay this kindness in kind or do much better. Send one of the servants out to find that merchant. Tell him to present himself here tomorrow morning. So the message was sent. When the merchant arrived the next day, the princess said, such generosity should be rewarded. Here, take these horses. And there were 10 beautifully capened horses, all laden with rolls and rolls of fine, beautiful silks and brocades. Take these back to my generous person and tell them thank you. The merchant was quite bemused by this, but it didn't bother him much. He turned his caravan back and started heading toward home. And while he saw them, he thought, oh, good. I need to do a lot of cutting today. And here comes a whole bunch of animals. They will all need food. So he rushed out into the wadi and cut as fast as he could and rushed back up, only to see that his friend was waiting for him. Wally, they were much impressed. They have sent you this gift of 10 horses with silks. What am I to do with silks? And horses. You might be able to sell those silks, but what should I do? Where would you take fine horses? Well, there is the Prince of Nabad. They raise wonderful horses there, and he's just as noble and kind as the princess. Take as much of the silk as you wish, and 2 horses for yourself, and present the other 8 to the handsome prince. So much bemused, the merchant agreed. And turned his caravan, finished a little bit as close by, and then went off. Started. Presented the horses to the prince. The prince's father said, we cannot allow ourselves to be outdone. That would not reflect well upon our country. But we must send back a gift so magnificent that surely it will overwhelm the person who receives it. So the next day, when the merchant came back as ordered, there was quite a assembly of creatures. There were elephants all dressed up, carrying goods of different kinds, and camels, and the finest of racehorses, and a whole company of men to protect them as they traveled along with this great wealth. When it arrived at Wally's house, he said, "What have I done? How am I supposed? I cannot make use of any of this. Take what of it you will, and take the rest of it to the princess." Well, the merchant was frightened himself. He had no idea how this would be received, but what else could he do? And so off they went. And the emperor of that kingdom saw the magnificent gifts. He said, "Daughter, whoever is doing this must surely want you as his bride. And with this kind of wealth, perhaps we should see if we can arrange such a thing." And so she agreed. She would at least go along and look. As they rode back toward the small village, the poor merchant was terrified. What would they do when they found their marvelous gift giver was an old man in a small hut on the edge of a village? Would they kill them both? What would happen? He went as slowly as he dared, with the majesty and their gifts and their train of steeples. And then when they were about a day away, he said, we really can't go to Wally unprepared. Let me run ahead. I'll ride ahead and tell him and get ready for your greet you tomorrow. And so he did. And he found his friend and told him of the situation they were in. And Wally said, "I just wanted to give a gift. Now we may both lose our lives. What am I to do? You have done nothing but been my friend. You don't have to go back to the king if you don't want. Leave this to me. Go about your business." The merchant rode away, but couldn't stand to leave his friend completely alone. And so he stopped a ways away, wondering what was going to happen next. Poor Walt. He had lived his whole life as a simple, happy man with a simple job to do. And now he had great princes angry at him and had placed his good friend's life in danger. I know what I must do. The only way out of this to protect my friend's life is to take my own. And so, in the dark of the night, he climbed up to a cliffside where he knew the rocks below were quite sharp. And he looked at it and thought, this is all I can do. There's no other way out of this. He stepped back and started to go forward, and he just couldn't do it. He fell to his knees and began to weep quietly. As he did, though, he began to realize there was light. It was the middle of the night, but there was light coming from behind him. He turned and opened his mouth in awe, for there were two beings made of pure light, Perry from heaven, sent. Wali Dad, through no fault of your own, you find yourself in this terrible situation. We have been sent to help you. Come with us. And they led him back to where his house had been. And there now was a fair-sized palace with many fine accoutrements and servants who he'd never seen before. None of these people had been near his town. But nonetheless, he greeted them as best he could and found a new magnificent bed and lay down and got up and waited for the people to arrive the next day. When the king arrived, he was quite surprised to see a nicely dressed elderly gentleman, looking at him with his eyes down and his hands clasped in prayer. What's the problem? I am Wally, the grass cutter. I had no idea I was going to set these momentous things in foot. And surely you can't blame me for trying to be kind. And we thought you wanted my daughter's hand in marriage. Me, an old man with one foot in the grave, marry a princess? But I know someone who might make a suitable husband for her. And the prince was sent for. And the two monarchs were delighted to make this alliance. And they created their own kingdom near where Wally lived. And he lived in his nice little house to the end of his days, a man quite content to be who he was. Tale of generosity.
Thank you, Ron. That was great. Okay, so do you have a story tonight? That's fine. Glad you made it though, and I hope you've enjoyed the stories.
Oh yeah, it's interesting. It's like television in a sense. I mean, back in the '60s, special.
Yeah.
I don't know.
Okay, we only have Nick now on Zoom.
Yeah, Jean just sent a chat message. She had to leave because she's still recovering from surgery, so she was
okay.
getting tired.
Okay, thanks, Nick. Barbara, do you have a story? Okay, well, we've had a bunch of good stories tonight. This Saturday is the celebration at the Claremont Folk Music Center, and we've got a great lineup of storytellers. I'm looking forward to it. Jane and Chris are working on getting refreshments.
Is there anything I can do to help?
Doing cookies.
Yeah.
We had a big group every
Yeah.
Yeah.
What would be good for me to bring?
any kind of.
Easy. So, well, you're my popcorn lady, but I love that Trader Joe's movie popcorn in the red bag.
Yeah, bring some of
Is that okay?
I'll
'Cause
bring a
that
big
stuff
bowl.
is illegal. It's so good.
Is it?
It is so
Sounds
good.
Have you
So if I-
tasted the maple fudge? Trader Joe's?
No, I have not, but perhaps I should. Okay. So if I brought a bunch of that?
Yeah, you don't have to make it yourself. You can buy it from Trader
No,
Joe's.
I'll bring the Trader Joe's bags. But
Yeah,
I'm just
yeah,
saying, if
yeah.
I do that,
Yeah, that's good.
okay. What about drinks or anything?
Well, we will have water, and Chris is going to make tea.
Chai tea, and I think I'm gonna do the hot chocolate.
You're going to do some hot
It's usually
chocolate.
cold, so
Yeah, that's right. Hot chocolate, okay.
if we had a member, just bring hot chocolate.
Yeah, I know you brought it last year, but you got a celebration earlier in the day.
The problem with that is that I am got a celebration at 2:00 in St. Paul's Church, Tustin, which is where the South Coast Storytelling Guild now meets. And so I'm going to go there, tell my tales, and we have to clean up and get ready for the 5:00 service. After the celebration. We now meet there because it was Robin's Childhood Church, and they're letting us use their rooms absolutely for free.
Oh, wow.
South Coast Storytelling Guild. South Coast Storytelling Guild.
Do they meet monthly?
We meet monthly on the first Thursday,
In person?
in person and by Zoom.
It's a hybrid meeting like we do.
Okay. How many people are usually?
Small. Hopefully, we'll be able to start growing things again. But yeah, it was once you would have 20 people at every meeting.
Yeah.
Now we're lucky if we get 6 or 7. So
And you said first Thursday?
first Thursday of every month, 7:00 in the sanctuary. And I open the doors and set things up to the best of my ability. And David Whiting is the official leader and runs the meetings, and we just keep on muddling along. All of you are more than welcome Saturday. All of you are more than welcome the first Thursday in December.
I apologize. Where's the location?
It is St. Paul's Episcopal Church, Tustin, and the address is 1221 WASS, WASS, Tustin, California. then on Sunday, zooming into a storytelling celebration, in the Delta area. I don't remember which group it's with, but anyway. One of them.
Well, there
invited
is
me.
the Delta word weavers.
That's the animal.
Oh, word reader. That's the animal.
Anyway, so it's, I'm obviously a fanatic of my field. I love storytelling.
Right.
You're a new person to me. Hey, you're a new person to me. Glenn's heard me for years. There was a time when I traveled to 4 different storytelling groups every month. 2 of them are no more. And my own guild, Tales Down by the Riverside, died a long time ago. So now I have this guild and South Coast. And I haven't been able to get here this year for a long time because we have a new director of the Raincross Master Chorale, and we were doing extremely difficult music that I didn't dare miss a rehearsal for. And they meet on Tuesday nights. Normally, of course, I can say, okay, I'll be over here. I'll miss that rehearsal. I didn't want to miss even one trying to get through this thing.
That's understandable.
Can I, for Merrick's benefit, since he's new to our group, a dear friend of mine, I hope he'll be back, and he's a speaker, and he talks in front of a lot of people. But can I just ask both of you real quick, and you tell longer stories than I tell. How do you remember your stories? Like that one that you just told, how do you memorize them?
If it was memorized, it'd be dead. The most dangerous thing a storyteller can try and do is tell the same story the exact same way over and over and over again. If it sounds memorized, you will lose your audience. I hold myself to key events, and I just let the words flow into those key events.
So you have anchors.
Yeah, you just
Yeah.
have anchor points. And sometimes you foul up completely, and you realize you've left out a really crucial part. And almost always through the magic of storytelling, when you get to where that part was important, the audience doesn't mind at all that you're just throwing it in now. They're wrapped up in the tale.
Because they don't know.
Yeah, right.
They don't know. Do you do the same thing?
Yeah. The hardest story I ever did, I wanted to do a Dr. Seuss story. That has to be memorized because of the rhyming.
Right,
Yeah.
right.
And that was really hard. But yeah,
Like the one you told tonight.
okay, the one I
That's
told
brilliant.
tonight, I told it a number of years ago. I have the book, and I just had to remember that there was a poisonous berry bush and a bubbling brook with poisonous water and the hot poker and then the key points, and then just tell the story.
So when you know you're going to tell that story tonight, how many days in advance do you know that you're going to tell that story tonight? And the second part of that question is, did you go back to the book for a minute and skim through the book and just reread it to remind yourself? Or did you literally, from years ago, remember?
Well, for this one, I decided it's what I wanted to do, but I couldn't find the book. So I didn't look at the book until today.
Okay, so you looked at it today.
Yeah.
Decided.
And I read it through a couple of times.
Okay.
And I actually never rehearsed the whole story all the way through before coming here tonight.
Wow.
Yeah. The main thing, the thing you want to do, you want to get the beginning and the ending. I did really practice the very ending of it. You want to get that right.
Okay.
And the stuff in the middle just sort of flows.
I have a storyboard in my head, each paragraph. Each paragraph has a picture of something for my trigger.
But don't you think it was interesting? You came up with notes. Notes at all. So you didn't fully.
Because I took it and then.
When I have
So that I
taught
can just-
storytelling,
I'm going to
stop
stop the
the
recording.
Right, right.
I have talked about those key points and had my